Welcome to the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence Storytelling Institute. Before we dive into today's impactful session, we want to ensure everyone has access to the tools they need for an inclusive experience. To guide us through the key accessibility options available during this webinar, please join me in welcoming our Tilde interpreters to the stage.
Thank you. My name is Ron, and I'm here with my co-interpreter, Karin, and we'll be your interpreters today for this webinar. Buenos días, mi nombre es Ron y estoy aquí con mi co-intérprete Karin y vamos a ser los intérpretes hoy día. Pueden ver en su pantalla las instrucciones para unirse a un canal de idioma en el caso de que usted no entienda ambos idiomas. Si está conectado con su computadora, por favor haga clic en el globo que dice interpretación, luego selecciona inglés para poder escuchar, o español, perdón, para poder escuchar la interpretación. Si se conectó con su teléfono inteligente, hace clic en más, luego selecciona interpretación de idiomas y por último selecciona español. So you can see on the screen the instructions for joining the language channel. On the left side, you can see the instructions for joining the English channel. You'll click on the globe that says interpretation, and then you select English. And on the right side, if you're joined to this webinar via your smartphone, you're going to click on more, then language interpretation, and then you select English. Again, this is only if you are not bilingual. If you understand both languages, you do not need to select the language channel. But if you do not understand Spanish, I would encourage you to select a language channel. Just one reminder to the panelists to please speak at a moderate pace so that we can do a good job as interpreters. Un recordatorio a los panelistas que hablen de paso moderado para que podamos hacer un buen trabajo interpretando. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Interpretation has been enabled.
Welcome to NRCDB Storytelling Institute. Before we start, I have some housekeeping that we need to know. Remember, this presentation is being recorded. We have access to live transcriptions, closed captions are available, so make sure you access those. Remember to enter any questions for the presenters in the chat, and they'll do their best to respond to them. Also, everyone's microphones are muted and cameras are turned off. And lastly, please reach out to any one of us, staff from NRCDB, if you have any issues with technology. Enjoy.
It takes a village to bring a vision to life. Let's take a moment to send a special thank you to every member of the NRCDV team and its leadership on this year's event. That's right, go ahead, put some fire in the chat and let our team know that we appreciate them. You can use the emojis, or you could go ahead and show your expressions of love in the chat. Right now, for opening remarks, please welcome to the stage NRCDV's Chief Executive Officer, Pamela Jacobs, along with her colleague, Yvonne Ortiz.
Thank you so much, Tamika. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the incredible interpretation team. And welcome, everyone, to NRCDV's Storytelling Institute. I'm Pamela Jacobs, and I have the honor of being CEO here at NRCDV. And I'm so happy that you all are here with us today. At the heart of every movement for justice are the stories that shape it. NRCDV Storytelling Institute was born from a deep understanding that storytelling is not just a tool, it's a transformative practice. It gives voice to survivors, honors their truths, and builds bridges between individuals, communities, and movements. As a survivor advocate myself, I've seen and experienced the power, healing, and transformation that happens through sharing our stories. And for domestic and sexual violence programs, storytelling is a powerful way to center lived experiences, challenge harmful narratives, and foster healing. It allows survivors to reclaim our power, advocates to deepen our impact, and communities to engage in meaningful dialogue and collective action. As women's rights advocate Zainab Salbi reminds us, the single thing all women, we, need in this world is inspiration, and inspiration comes from storytelling. I believe we could all certainly use some extra inspiration and hope right now, so I'm grateful and very excited for what's to come over these next 2 days. We also sadly recognize that this will be the final Storytelling Institute funded through the American Rescue Plan. While this marks the end of one chapter, it is absolutely not the end of the story. The work will continue through the voices we've uplifted, the connections we've built, and the unwavering commitment to survivor-centered advocacy. We stand on the shoulders of the advocates who came before us, visionaries who recognized the power of narrative to shift culture and hearts. We thank them deeply for laying the foundation for this institute and for believing in the power of stories to create change. I'm incredibly honored to be here today with Mathina, with the incredible NRCDB team, with Amy, the interpretation team, and with each and every one of you. Together, we continue this legacy, amplifying voices, building community, and moving toward a world free from violence for all. Thank you all. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to hand it over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you so much, Pam. It is my honor to introduce to you Amy Keeney. She serves as the Executive Director of First Step Domestic Violence Services in Fostoria, Ohio, where she leads with compassion, vision, and a deep commitment to ministry and to survivor-centered care. With a rich background in healthcare and higher education, Amy brings a unique interdisciplinary perspective to her work. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Healthcare Management and a Master of Science in Leadership from South University, as well as a Master of Practical Theology from Windebringer Theological Seminary. In addition to her role at First Step, Amy serves as pastor at St. John's United Church of Christ in Fostoria, embodying her dedication to healing and community empowerment. As a participant in NRCDV's Storytelling Institute cohort, Amy contributed thoughtful insights rooted in her lived experience and leadership within a rural domestic violence program. Her storytelling reflects a deep understanding of the intersection between trauma, faith, resilience, and she has consistently uplifted the voices of survivors and frontline advocates during cohort meetings. Amy, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for that beautiful welcome, Yvonne. They tell me I have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to start my timer here. So, I'm a pastor, so I want to make sure that I don't lose track of that time, because at church I have a little more time. But what I want to say is I am just so grateful for the Storytelling Institute. All of you who are here are going to be so blessed by it. And what's so great about the Storytelling Institute, we all know that as directors, as people who are leading nonprofit organizations, the importance of getting our name out there, the importance of fundraising, and the importance of connecting with our community. And one of the best ways we know that we can connect with our community is by storytelling. It's simply by telling the stories. Our survivors, they have so much rich history and so much just great stories to tell. But oftentimes they don't really have that ability, or if they do, it's going to be much later in their journey. But their stories highlight the importance of organizations that serve survivors. And so when I learned about the Storytelling Institute, I was so interested. I was very, very, very interested because, for one thing, I'm a pastor and that's what I do. I tell stories. But I know from being in the nonprofit world for some time that stories are what connects you. It's what connects you to your audiences. It's what connects you to those who are going to be your supporters. And so And then what I loved about the Storytelling Institute is, so I knew that stories are important. I already knew that. But what I didn't know is things that are really important about how to tell a story, how to tell it not only in a way that honors the survivor, but in a way that also reaches to the audience. And that's what I learned in the Storytelling Institute. How can I tell these stories that live in our hearts? Oh, those of us who work in this area know that we have so many stories that live in our hearts and that we want to tell them. But how do we tell them in a manner that connects? And how do we use the stories to help our nonprofits continue to serve? And that's what the Storytelling Institute did for me. It also did another very important thing. It made me realize that I need to have my ears turned on for hearing stories at all times. So many times we hear something happening, whether we're in a shelter, whether you're whatever your position is, you hear the stories of your survivors, and sometimes it can honestly, I know, be just another part of our day. But when we look at what we learn through Methina and through the Storytelling Institute, we learn to have those ears that want to listen to the stories that, frankly, are going to pull the heartstrings. Because really, when it comes down to it, that's what people listen to. I can give them all the statistics in the world. I can tell them about the economic impact. I can tell them how many people we serve. But until I get down to the heart of it and tell the story, that is what really brings everyone together and says, hey, this is a cause that I believe in. This is a cause that I want to support because I'm hearing the difference that it's making. So as we talked through the as we went through and we began to look at, hey, what are the powers of our stories and how can we pull them in and use them in our work? I realized that I had actually recently been involved in a great story. And you're going to be able to see that story because we actually had a video made. And we use that video all the time. When we go out and we do presentations in the public, when we're talking to our fundraisers, when we have it just multiple places that we use that video. And it is very touching. It is a short video, and that's the other thing that the Storytelling Institute tells you is that this is not some big long story. You just need to get their attention and to tell them the difference that's being made. And that's what this video does. It gets the attention, and we all have those stories, and you are all capable of pulling them and having them put into something similar, whether it's a video or something else. So I would encourage you to take all you can, drink in this Storytelling Institute and drink in the information they give you. And there goes my timer. And one last thing that I will say is you're not going to remember your stories. Start a file, and they're going to tell you this. Start a file and start tracking your stories because the more of them you have and the more of them you can pull from. I'm looking forward right now. Our shelter will actually be celebrating 50 years in just a couple of, in just a few years. And I am already looking at this file and going, where can I pull the stories that I'm going to use for this 50th anniversary gala? And it's all honestly, it is absolutely, um, I cannot say enough that it came from the Storytelling Institute. I would not have known how to pull all that together and do it without Methina and this institute. And so I'm very sad to hear that this is the final year, but all of you drink it in, drink it in. And I believe I did send I believe you do have the link to the video. So thank you so
How
much.
often do you visit the grocery store? Once a week? Twice a week? 3 times a week? Do you like going to the grocery store? Are you a let's just browse the aisles or make a list person? Until about a month ago, Sam had not visited the grocery store in well over 3 years. Self-checkouts were nearly a foreign concept. And she loved fresh vegetables, but Sam had not been able to choose a fresh vegetable for herself in years. When Sam finally left her abuser, one of the first things we did was take her to the grocery store. She spent 45 minutes browsing the produce aisle, picking up the vegetables, smelling them, picking out the plumpest and the freshest, and then returned to cook her children their first fresh vegetables ever. It was Sam's first step in taking back her life. In Seneca County alone, there are over 180 abused women like Sam. Women who may not have visited a grocery store or picked out their own vegetables in years. You can help women like Sam take the first step to their new life by donating grocery gift cards. These cards will be used for women in shelter in need of food, empowering them to have choice, even in their groceries.
Thank you, Amy. Celebrating 20 years of building communities, empowering women, training speakers, supporting organizations, corporations, and leading change. Please welcome to the stage your NRCDV Storytelling Institute facilitator, the award-winning consultant, executive coach, CEO, and four-time published author, Mathina James Brightful.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And Amy, I hope you are looking at the chat. You all light the chat up. Let Amy know how that resonated with you. I promised the team I was going to stay on task today, but I just can't. I have to just say thank you for allowing us to share your experience and your words. And Amy you attended the Institute 2 years ago, I think. And so I just want you all to see the journey that is at your fingertips. And so thank you so much for that, Amy, and for everyone who has come before me. I do want to join my peers, colleagues, and friends in saying welcome. And for many of you, this is welcome home. Welcome to meeting you as a new friend. And some of us are from all over. I was watching you all say where you're tuning in from in the chat. And I'm going to say good morning, good afternoon. I don't think we have anyone on that it's evening for, but good evening. Okay. I want to just acknowledge that we're tuning in from everywhere. And with that being said, I don't know how many of you, but I've had to settle dogs already this morning, rework in the garden, run to a venue. We've all had so much happening already. And to help us be grounded in the experience that we're walking into, I want to invite you to just get settled, centered, and focused on the conversation we're about to have. So I want you to take a moment, and I'm going to invite you now to mute your notifications. I know, let folks know that you're investing in your remarkable transformation today, and that you want to show up and serve them in even more powerful ways. You are absolutely in a safe space. And if you're able, I want you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Inhale and slowly exhale. I want you to feel your shoulders dropping away from your ears. Rotate your shoulders gently and let your neck move and let your body do what it needs. Take another deep breath. Breathe it in and exhale slowly. And I want you to feel your hips settle into your seat if you're able. If you're able to stand for a moment, that's fine too. Notice your feet be grounded on the floor and just feel that connection. And if you're not able to move, Simply visualize what peace feels like for you. Now, we're going to have a good and meaningful time together. So take one more deep breath in. And as you exhale, I want you to think about this question. What do you want to get out of today's experience? Now, when you're ready, open your eyes, and I invite you to share your intention in the chat. Just drop in what you hope to receive from today. And let's set our intentions fully in the chat, because I want you to remember that the most important part of today is you. Not because you're way more important than anyone else, but because you're present. Okay. With that intention and seeing the chat fill up with feeling energized to share more stories, ethical ways to share survivor stories, embodying storytelling, to explain the relevancy and the impact of the work that we do. I know you said I do, but I'm aligning with you. Sharing our messages in new ways, how to tell survivor stories, right? Focusing on the impact of storytelling, making connections. I love seeing those light up in the chat. So here's what we're going to do now. We know that everything you do creates a ripple effect that extends across communities, states, and the world. The content that we've curated today is designed to help you boldly step into your next level and to use storytelling as a powerful vehicle to get there. So here's my invitation. I'm always going to invite you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to invite you. Be fully engaged. Today is designed to boost your confidence, to strengthen your skills, and provide you with tangible techniques that you can apply. And most of all, it's to help you humanize the stories of those that you serve and to bring your partners into the heart of that story. And if you're willing to make that agreement with me to play full out and to be fully present, drop a yes in the chat. Drop a yes in the chat. Okay. Dawn was first. I saw Dawn's yes. Hell yes. Okay. Yes, queen. Love it. I see those yeses lighting up the chat. We are going to have a good time together. I promise you. So let's sharpen our storytelling power together. And let's introduce the content that we've designed. We have designed this content to apply to all forms of storytelling. The stories we speak, the ones you write, and the ones you share through creative channels. Whatever your comfort zone or preferred method, you are welcome here. And we know you're joining us from different roles, experiences, and levels of confidence. And everything about this session was designed with that in mind. So I want you to stretch yourself a little. Remember, I'm always going to invite you, so I invite you to stretch yourself a little. Try something new or deepen what already feels natural. And no matter how you share stories, the frameworks and the principles that we're covering today apply across the board. So here's what we're going to focus on in our time together. First, we're going to help you identify your storytelling goals. Clarify what stories you need, who they're for, and what they're meant to do. Next, we'll guide you in building a story bank, a sustainable way to collect and organize the powerful stories your organization is already telling and curating. Kind of like what Amy said, being able to start looking at what it did look like to curate stories to celebrate anniversaries or new initiatives. And we'll talk about how to develop storytellers within your team or agency, because storytelling shouldn't rest on one person alone. You can take that back to your board of directors, okay? It's about creating a culture of shared voice. So somebody asked in the chat earlier whether or not today's session and tomorrow's session will be the same. It will not. Every session will build upon the others. Right, absolutely. I've been doing this work for 20 plus years now. And so I align with, sometimes we have to lovingly bring our board along, okay? So if you've completed your pre-work, amazing. I'm super proud of you. I was watching some of those videos and recordings that you all were posting on Padlet. Give yourself a round of applause. I'm super proud of you for that, right? And I do want you to know, if you have not, no stress, no stress. Just make time to revisit it before or whenever you can. And that work will help us with our sessions and stories. And it'll help you have a story in mind as we do practice throughout. Okay. Here's a real strong point that I want us to align with. None of this matters unless you can apply it. Bring to life your day-to-day work and use it to drive connection, advocacy, and transformation. Our goal today is a simple one: to help you feel informed, encouraged, and ready to practice the stories you want to tell, to refine them with purpose and bring them back to your organizations with clarity and confidence. Now, before we dive into Module 1, a few quick notes to set us up for success. The workbook has been dropped in the chat, so go ahead and download it now if you haven't already. And you'll be able to use it to stay organized throughout the sessions. We've designed the workbook to align fully with what you're learning today, so your notes can stay connected to the content and are easy to reference later. Our agenda includes 2 core modules today, and we'll move through them with time for questions and interaction. If you can't tell by how often I've encouraged you to use the chat, we're going to certainly be having lots of interaction. And to keep things fresh and actionable, we'll do a brief evaluation at the end of each day. So about 10 questions today, and that feedback helps us to keep improving the Institute. Because while this is the final for now, we might make a comeback in future, right? We may, I don't know, invite you to come into the room with us where I can really get my hands on your stories. The point is that we want you to have this information, and we want to keep refining it and making it impactful for you today and tomorrow. Now, not all of our housekeeping is done. Drop an R in the chat if you are ready to jump into Module 1. Drop an R in the chat. Okay, I see those R's going. I want to start off by sharing with you all one of the ways that I recognize the power and impact of stories. I was a novice educator working in a dual agency that focused on sexual assault and domestic violence, and we covered 2 counties. And I remember applying for funding. When I say a novice, I was in my early 20s. Say I look like I'm in my early 20s now. Thank you, thank you. But I was very young in the field, and I had applied and gotten a grant that let me do multiple healthy relationship sessions in middle schools. We ended up seeing about 130 students in that time period. Oh, thank you, Adrian. Thank you. Is it Adrian or Adriana? I appreciate you. All right. Thank you, Denise. And 130 students, and we did that in 4 different schools. And at the end, it was my first time having a site visit where I had to be the person to talk about the program. And I remember getting called into my executive director's office, sitting in her steel gray chair. I'm so glad we've improved our office spaces. Like sitting in that steel gray chair and looking at the funder who was there for, yes, exactly, Sarah. The funder who was there to ask me about the program, and they just said in a very stoic way, "Tell me what you did," or "Tell me about the program." So I talked about it. I talked about all the stats, all the data, and I said, as their eyes kind of glazed over a little bit, and I'm like, I know they're going to multiple organizations and different types. And I said, can I share one of the most impactful things for me and what made this entire project worth it for me? And the person nodded. And I said their name for the first time. Hint, hint, hint. Use the funder's name, not the organization, but the person sitting in front of you. Okay. So I said their name. Let's say their name is Mary. I said, Mary, it was the last session in one particular middle school. After 4 weeks, I had an 8th grader ask, could she talk to me after? And I said, of course, absolutely. Now, this group of 8th graders gave me a run for my money. Okay. And they did everything they could think of to charge me, right? And to get me off track. But this particular 8th grader asked at the last session, so I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I slump in my seat, and I said, okay, what's up? And she proceeded to tell me that she's not lying. And she told me the story about her mother's boyfriend coming into her room and attempting to touch her. And that this particular night, as she's telling me about this, her mother was off and didn't have to work, which meant that the boyfriend would come over. And she was terrified, terrified. And she talked about how her plan was to pull the covers over her head and sleep with a sharpened pencil in her left hand and a flashlight in her right. And all she said, kept saying to me is, I'm not lying, I'm not lying, I'm not lying. And as somebody who had still been doing this work for 6 or 7 years at a time, I truly felt like I knew what to say and what to do. And I talked about how we talked through what to do next and how I took that young person to the school social worker and we reported the incident in order to get them help. But I also talked about how I left that day, went home, called my executive director and said, hey, if they don't do something, I'm bringing her home with me. Now we know we can't do that, but that was my passion. When I finished telling the story of that experience, I walked out of my executive director's office with the funder and I went back to my desk. And as the funder was walking out, they waved at me and gave me my first smile and walked out. And my director came back and she held up a piece of paper and it was a small check. And she said, in 25 years of doing this, I've never had a site visit where the person writes a personal check to make a donation to the organization. You did good. It took me 15 years to figure out what made that person write that check. It wasn't about the data and what we did with the money. It was telling the story of the impact, not just for the listener, but for us as the storytellers, for the communities and the agencies that we represent. What I want you to start thinking about, and what I hope you'll take away from this session, is how we can share stories that not only are powerful, but purposeful. Stories that move people, stories that shift perception, spark connection, and bring our mission to life. So let's ground ourselves in this together. And I want you to drop in the chat, what are some of your common goals when you focus on telling stories? What are some of the common goals you have when you focus on telling stories? Drop those in the chat. Oh man, is it me or Maya? I don't mean for you to cry. Just sharing, right? But thank you for that. Love that. Yes, inspired. I've had a similar experience when doing our educational program in middle schools. Yes. When you have young people tell you, yeah, about that impact. Lasting impact. You want to gather partners for working with youth. You want to make connection. You want policy change. Oh, thank you, Janice. Or Janice, whichever one. Increase engagement with students with prevention. Make it real for them. All right, reach hearts, uplift stories. Amplify survivors' voices. I want people to know what others are going through. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So some of these common goals that we have, and I see you all lighting up the chat. Sometimes I have to remind myself, and the team has to remind me not to read every single thing. But we do capture these as we share. Want to heal someone with my story and how they've overcome. Thank you so much for that. So one of the things that we see is that one of the most powerful ways that we build that loyalty, that connection, that trust is through storytelling. So I want to celebrate you all for recognizing how you tell stories and why they matter. Now, let's look at how we currently share those stories, because when we aim to shift perspectives or spark empowerment or change policy, where we tell those stories are just as important as those stories themselves. So where are you currently sharing stories to inspire, challenge assumptions, or even highlight your values. Okay. Empower others. Absolutely. Continue cultural teachings of life that also through storytelling, love culture. Absolutely. So I want you to see on our next screen, as we talk about those ways that we were sharing, right? We want to change policy, right? Humanize statistics, exactly, right? That some of the spaces where we tell those stories, they absolutely matter. When we think about using social media, podcasts, even traditional news outlets, these are all important storytelling mediums. But how many of you have gotten a call after something has happened in your community asking you to speak on a podcast or be interviewed on the local news? Has anyone ever had that happen here? Can you drop that a Y in the chat if you've had that happen? Where you get that phone call? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I see those Y's in the chat. So these are the moments when we share our stories, and it's crucial to know what to say and how to say it. We want our storytelling to be woven into every space and every medium in a powerful and intentional way. That where we share these stories, where they come from, matters. Yeah, you've gotten that several times. We had a policymaker say that deviant racism does not happen in our community. I would like to learn how to show him that is not the case. These are the things that we're talking about. So highlighting the stories of what's happening, right? And then you think about where you gather the stories as we move on to our next piece of content here. You're gathering them from news, from social media, from your grant reports. So where do your stories begin, right? Let's think about where our stories are actually coming from and go beyond what we immediately see. So we gather stories, and let me know if you've got some that aren't highlighted here. We gather stories from staff, clients, program reports, social media comments, volunteers, DM messages on social media, staff briefings and meetings. Some of us have volunteers who are survivors themselves. Some of us are survivors. And we come back because we want to give back to the organizations that have supported us. Our personal histories give us powerful stories from families, friends, our own experiences. This is why it's so critical to understand not just how we tell stories, but where they come from and how they live within an organization. Has anyone ever worked somewhere and then a person leaves, right? Insert person. Someone leaves. And later you realize, oh, remember that program or idea? Who started that? And then someone says, oh, that's insert person's name. They left. Oh yeah, they left like a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 weeks ago. Maybe you even thought about reaching out to maybe ask them. Right? For that information. I've had it happen. I remember leaving an organization, and I was there for well over a decade at that time, almost two. And how we started our bilingual advocate program and community educator program went with me because we had instituted a storytelling bank. So the key stories that often leave with people, but it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, John said, yes, when I started my nonprofit, absolutely. So it doesn't have to be that way. With intentional effort, some thoughtful processes, we can make sure that those valuable stories stay with the organization and continue to shape the organization for years to come. The way we do this is by building a story bank. Now, if you want to know what a story bank is, just go ahead and give me a question mark emoji in the chat, or just drop a question mark in the chat. Like, what's that? What's a story bank? And you're not reading the screen on your slides. Absolutely. Thank you, Jocelyn. Absolutely. All right. A story bank is a central place to collect and assess stories that help you meet your goals. And there are 2 types. How many types? Drop a 2 in the chat. Drop a 2 in the chat. There are 2 types. You can have a physical story bank and you can have a digital one. I am going to encourage you to create a digital story bank. Okay? A digital story bank is a cloud-based, and it's accessible from anywhere. And it's also easier to update than a physical version. I remember right before COVID, our offices had to move. And the survivors in our human trafficking program had created this beautiful mural. It was what is called mosaic. It was a mosaic. So it had all these pieces of glass and clay, and it created this beautiful, gorgeous tree and had small butterflies in it. It was amazing. And when we moved, we could not get that mosaic off the wall to go with us to our new space. Whatever they used, whatever kind of nail glue they used to put it up there, it would not come off that wall. And so that beautiful piece, and some of the survivors who worked on that piece were still active in our organization. And, at the beginning of COVID, everybody thought it was only going to be for like a week or 2. And we wanted them to still see their beautiful work. So of course we took a picture of it and so on. But that was the second time that this organization had to move. It had to lose a piece of amazing artwork that survivors had done in their space, right? So even if you have those visual art pieces, you'll want to scan and digitize them in some way. And over time, you may not be able to keep that physical artwork like we couldn't, but you can still preserve it digitally and continue to use it to share your message. So a digital story bank ensures that you can carry your stories forward even if someone is out sick, if they leave the organization, or if they're simply unavailable. For example, if you're busy with policy work, I remember seeing that in the chat, or you're testifying at the courthouse, you still have access to those stories and resources whenever you need them. If you got to step out of the courtroom, pull something up off the database on your phone, and then go back inside, right? And you have a viable, live, fresh message to share. Tim said I'm in both of those spaces, right? There are many options for where to build your story bank. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But for now, let's start by building it together. So if you're following along, I want you to go to your workbook and turn to page 18. Turn to page 18, where it has a culture building roadmap. This page will help you to see how these pieces of information work together in action. And when we build a story bank, the goal is to make it searchable, shareable, indexed, and process driven. So let me break those down. Okay, let's break down what each of these words mean. Searchable means that you can easily look for specific stories within the bank. For example, stories about certain programs or particular types of impact. Shareable means that anyone across your agency or organization can access it and use the stories. And for those of you who aren't with an agency, you can absolutely create a personal story bank. I actually took that concept working with speakers and coaches, and we would build their individual story banks because they were speaking for a living professionally. And it occurred to me, this absolutely needs to be living and viable in our organizations because we have way more stories that we have to share amongst a large ecosystem, right? So if you're a survivor or someone using your lived experience to speak and advocate, you can use these same tools, and it helps you add depth to your messaging when reaching out to organizations or speaking publicly. And if you want to learn more about this, then feel free to drop questions in the chat. I've got you, okay? So I have anyone here that might be not necessarily with the organization. We usually have folks every year that aren't with an organization. Maybe you're a survivor and you're using your lived experience to speak or share stories. Just drop an S in the chat drop an S in the chat for speaker. I just want to know if we have a few folks here, and I'll continue to use examples like this. Okay, so I see a few of you dropping in the chat. I'll continue to use examples like this to support you throughout the Institute, okay? Okay, Kayla says, have I wanted to become a speaker? Okay, I got you all, okay? So feel free, even though I use organization language quite a bit in the Institute, always know that I'm thinking of you all as well, and feel free to drop your questions in the chat. All right, indexed means that your stories include keywords that make them easier to find. For example, if you need a volunteer story connected to an annual fundraiser, you can search those keywords and the right stories will come up. All right. Now, process driven means that there's a clear method for how the stories are added, updated, and even removed. Team members know where the bank lives and how to contribute or edit stories and how often updates should happen. And this keeps your story bank active and useful over time. Okay. Now let's talk about where your story bank lives and how to build it step by step. If you're ready for step-by-step action, drop step in the chat. Okay, excellent. I see those. All right. I see you all in chat. Perfect. So here's our step one. I want you to decide where your stories will live. I recommend using existing tools, especially since many of us as nonprofits, we have to be creative with our limited resources, right? I know I'm not by myself. Okay, I see the emojis, all right? So if you've ever had to get creative, go ahead and drop a 1 in the chat. I know I'm talking to my people right now. Okay, those ones moved real fast, y'all. So many of us may be using, I love the 111 Many of us may already use Google Drive or Microsoft Suite. And these platforms already have shared folders and tools that are great for building a digital story bank. And if you're looking for other options, consider tools like Airtable, Notion, or even coda.io. So that's C as in cat, O, D as in divine, A as in apple, .io. I as in igloo, and O as in opportunity. All right. Thank you, Brecken. Okay. So these platforms let you create a cloud-based, searchable, digitized system. Okay. Think of it as a way to have one link that can lead to multiple files, just like an organized Google folder. All right. So step two is to identify a central person or point of contact for your story bank. This is the person who manages the story bank. They review entries, update and organize the content, make decisions about when stories are ready to share. And this could be a communications lead, a trainer, or even an administrative assistant. The key is that they keep the story bank consistent and up to date, and they'll know the submission criteria when something moves from a draft to being fully shareable, and how to maintain the overall process. Okay. Step three is to index it, to make sure your stories have keywords that help you pull up exactly what you need. For example, if you need a volunteer story for your annual fundraiser, keywords will help you find it fast. Now let's look at how we can create an index. Okay. Remember, well, I see somebody dropped in the chat, a hard copy or USB, not a cloud. That means that that's always only going to be with one person. Now, if you are a speaker, right, if you aren't running an organization, then it's sitting with one person is perfectly fine. But if you're running an organization with multiple people that need access, then that will be a more restrictive way of building a story bank. So it's something to consider, okay? Something to consider. All right. Thank you all for dropping those resources and feedback in the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now let's go into what we mean by index. On page, I think it's page 18, you'll see an example of this in your workbook. And as we bring up the slide for it, I want you to look at each component of this as we break it down, right? My recommendation is to start with the types of victimization. Then go to geographic location, maybe specialty populations, or a particular grant that might be connected to it. Your index is simply about the facts, right? This part is not about the emotion. This is where your empathy and your humanity come through in how you tell and represent the stories, along with the people represented in your stories. The index is just the factual foundation that makes the story easy to find. It can feel a little uncomfortable to reduce someone's story down to quick details or demographics, and that's okay. That's why we appreciate you being in this work, because we know when you tell the story, you're going to pull all of that power and emotion back in, right? However, I want you to remember that your empathy belongs in that space, in the storytelling, not in the indexing. So try using an index to make stories easier to search and retrieve when you need them. So for example, you see here on the slide where it says, and in your workbook it says DV, right? That's the victimization. Monroe County is the jurisdiction. The specialty, or it's the gun violence, is what this particular story is about. And then you have when it was. So this says June. I thought we used to have a date right there, but June, right? And maybe I'll say June 2025, if it's 2025, or 2021, or 2019. Okay, so that just kind of gives you an opportunity. And I do want you to do some work around jotting down what some of those keywords can be that you can utilize in your index. Now, step 4, and we're going to prepare to head to a break in just a few minutes, okay? So step 4 is to be thoughtful about the process for gathering and storing those stories. We'll talk more shortly about the stories you already have and the stories you still need to collect, but start by thinking through the full process. How will you gather a story? Who will review it? And how will it get added to the story bank? Okay. For those of you who are working individually, you might not need a formal review process, but for those agencies, whether local or national, it's important to have a clear, documented system to explain to your staff or team what the story bank is, why it matters, and how they can contribute. Make this an ongoing conversation, not just one time. Make it an ongoing conversation. How many index words should you try to have per story? My recommendation is to do as many as you need to be able to find it. So for example, if it's just DV and you're like domestic violence, June 2021, that might be enough. But if you want a little bit more so that you can have keywords come up when you search it, then you want to add a little bit more to the name of the story. And you may start with just domestic violence, gun violence, for example. And then as you search later on, gun violence story, then you may pull it up and you go, you know what, let me add this to the title. You can always rename later on. Okay, really good question. Reckon just dropped that in the chat. Great question. All right, so what I've learned from working with organizations is that storytelling isn't a one-off training where everyone instantly gets on board. It's a continual, evolving practice that needs regular revisiting. Now, I want you all to take a moment and think about how you would create an index for one of your stories, as I'm hearing you all do in the chat. And if you're not sure which story to use, start with the story of how your organization was founded. Think about the facts, Where did it start? What type of victimization or issue was it connected to? And who did it serve? And think about that. I'm going to give us 2 minutes, 2 minutes. And I want you to think about your story index, okay? And as we prepare to come back and dive deeper, I want you to get ready to drop some feedback in the chat when you come back, okay? I'd love for us to have 1 or 2 people to come off mute and share. Go ahead and think about that. And we're going to give you 2 minutes to do so. Okay, so come back, come back, come back. Now, I would love for you all to drop in the chat. What was that like for you? Now's a great time for you to also drop any additional questions in the chat so that we can support you. How was it to start coming up with that index? Very helpful. Martha came up with juvenile theft, female, and AHS. Our stories are currently diversion cases expanding to provide assistance to DV. Good, 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 good. So that's a great example of starting with what you have to then build out your index and your story bank as those additional stories kind of come in. You've been doing it already, but in a different format. Yes, Sarah. I love it. I love hearing it. All right. So one of the things that I hope that you're seeing here is that you want to capture those keywords that allow you to quickly find the story, that makes it shareable, and that ensures anyone on your team can use it. All right. And let's see. Okay. Hi, Lou. All right. All right, so I did want to make sure we had an opportunity to just really get clear on that. And before we introduce any additional new content, I want to see if there are any more questions, and then we will head into a break if there are no additional questions right now. Okay, in the past, this has been an area where folks have felt like they needed some additional support, so I wanted to breathe without moving too quickly. So does anyone have any additional questions about anything we've talked about this morning, but certainly about building that story bank before we take a 5-minute break? So far, so good. If you're ready for a break, drop a 5 in the chat. Okay, all right, good, okay. All right, so then you'll have about 5 minutes to stretch, to stand up if you need to, or grab a sip of water. And if during this 5-minute break you want to drop any questions in the chat, I'm seeing one pop in now, feel free to do so, and then we will discuss it when we come back after our 5-minute break, okay? When we come back, we're going to jump into an activity where you'll start brainstorming where you find these stories in your organization or in your own experience. So let's go ahead and take those 5 minutes.
We hope you are enjoying the 2025 NRCDV Storytelling Institute. It's now time for a 5-minute break. Join us back here in a few moments. That'll be at 1:13. Join us back in a few moments at 1:13. We hope you are enjoying your break. It's now time to return to the session in progress. Please welcome back your facilitator, Mathina James Brightful.
Thank you, Tamika. I appreciate that. So I've gotten some two questions in the chat. I want to pull up Tim. Tim, if you could either share more in the chat about your question on how do we address victims and parole hearings, or actually raise your hand and we'll loop it back and bring you to the stage and create the space for you to share. But I also received a question by Caleb. And Caleb's talking about using a similar filing system regarding a case to advocate. And how do we bring the story bank and connect it with law enforcement? So I have a couple of questions and insights. And Caleb, again, same as with Tim, feel free to either drop more in the chat or raise your hand and we'll work on bringing you to the stage so that we can talk it out. So if you already have some type of system, and shout out to, is it Cheryl, who dropped in the chat about using some type of system to break up stories and index. If you already have a system where you have captured, let's say you've been through going to court, and you have a folder with documentation regarding the process that you've been through when going to court. So what I would recommend is, if you are going to work with a law enforcement or a different organization and you want to share a story, don't worry, I'm going to break down the difference between stories and other things in just a moment. If you want to share a story based on that, take a component of your experience and build the story around that, and then what you want folks to do. as I teach you all throughout the Institute, without overloading you right now, you'll see what we mean by you want to build the story and then build the ask of the listener. I said, please overload me. All right, you want to build the ask of the listener or reader, what have you. So for example, let's say you had a particularly challenging experience when you went to court and it wasn't even by the judge or the other attorney. Let's say it was the person who worked the desk to let you in, or to direct you when you got there. And you pull that part of your experience out of your lived experience, and you wrap a story around for the court system on why it's critical for even their frontline staff, their security, to be trained on what it looks like to support anyone who's been through trauma walking through their doors, but in particular, survivors of intimate partner violence, right? And you build on that. Same thing with law enforcement. Maybe you had a particular experience with a law enforcement officer, good, bad, or in between, whatever your experience was, and you want to highlight that part of your experience when working with law enforcement. So in the story bank, you would build out that piece. Here what I mean by build out. If this is like womp womp, tune me out for 36 seconds and I'll tell you when to tune back in. So here's how you build. Here's what we mean by build it out. Maybe you record yourself talking about that particular experience, and then you also include an ask of the law enforcement officer or team that might be listening. Maybe you write it out and you type up your story, and that, again, still centered around that experience, and you store that in the bank. Okay, is that helpful, Kayla, in terms of, and anyone else can answer, in terms of how you take the evidence of your lived experience and convert it into a story that can then convert to an audience and get them to take action? Okay, perfect. Awesome. All right, and now okay, I don't know if we got Tim back or not. Any other questions? Lou, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. All right. And I didn't get Tim back. Okay, Tim, I'm just going to say, when you talk about how to address working with victims and parole hearings, what comes to my mind when I read that without any additional context or information is I want you all to be cognizant that there are stories that aren't safe or ready to tell at certain points in the journey. Does that make sense? So if you have a situation where someone is actively going back and forth and in court and it's a volatile experience, it may not be safe to highlight or share their story as they're going through it. 9 times out of 10, it's not, right? So you want to be mindful of those aspects, okay? Okay. Tim, I was saying if you had some additional context to put around your question, to go ahead and drop that in the chat, and let me know so that I can further support you. How do you talk through that with survivors if they really want to share? A couple of things I've experienced. I've actually worked with survivors who we got to City Hall, the mics are on, the mayor's there, and they're like, I can't do it. And they walk away after we did all the prep. And I will name that at NRCDV, we do have resources, and we'll continue to give them to you all. There are many of which are already in your workbook about preparing folks for telling their story. Now, with that being said, let me name, yes, exactly, 100% normal, right? Let me name that one of the things that I talk through with anyone, right, but particularly with survivors regarding sharing their story is we create a container, safe space. Like if they've got a real strong relationship with me, then I might bring in a different advocate or, somebody that works in our finance office within our organization. Again, keeping their story safe and confidential. And I have them share in front of those people and ask them to process how they're feeling about it. And if they're like, oh, I'm great, I'm fine. I'm like, well, what makes you feel great? What makes you feel fine? And we have them unpack exactly that, just so they can name, what is it? The fact that I'm sharing, the fact that I know who I'm sharing it in front of, and how these folks show up in the world, the fact that the person who may have harmed or hurt me isn't in the audience to hear me share this. All of those things can be strong triggers, and they want to think about that prior to sharing in a public setting. Asking them, how would you feel if once it's out there, you couldn't take it back? Because in reality, with social media, by the time it's out there, there's a very strong possibility that they couldn't pull it back, so to speak, and have them think about that component of it. And then give them options. How about we share it and maybe we don't put your name or any identifying features in your story, even though you're the one telling it, just to safeguard until you get to another point in the process. So those are some quick kind of thoughts or ideas to share. Our hearings are no longer in person, so victim impact is not the same as in person. You're welcome. Okay, so when we're talking about these components, how we share, and we'll talk about it in the Institute, the things that we're encouraging you to include amplifies the impact, whether you're virtual or you're in person. So you want to think about some of those components, okay? Okay, ask me more, keep dropping them in the chat. This is excellent and we're doing fantastic. So what I want to do is I wanted you to jump to page 21, should be 21 in your workbook, because there are 3 processes that I want you to think about when it comes to building your story bank, right? This is really about building your storytelling culture, your storytelling culture. The idea that you already have stories you're telling, as we've kind of seen highlighted in the chat by our peers that are talking about how they're storing their stories, for example. Now it's about intentionally bringing those stories forward. So we're going to talk through a series of individual exercises so you can dig deeper. And some of you probably already started jotting notes earlier, and that's great. That's great. And the reason I want you to really do this piece is because it helps you prepare to share your ideas with other influencers in your organizations. For example, your executive director, your marketing team, if you have one, your board members, your volunteers, your peers, your supervisor. These next exercises will help you develop the language to bring those other influencers on board. Okay. A common concern that I hear is, do we have to start all over? And the answer is no. You don't have to start over. You just have to start. So let's look at all 3 of these components. All right. Bring is about the stories you're already telling. This could be your founding story, an impact story, or even stories about your current work in progress. Think about who is currently telling these stories in your organization. Is it you? Is it someone else? And could they add these stories to the bank in the next 30 days? Okay, now don't get scared. I just want you to think about it. All right. This is going to help you understand what stories to add first, where do you start, and then who you may need to get buy-in from. Okay? Breathe. I see the whole emoji. All right. Could the stories you're already telling be added to your story bank? Maybe you thought about this during your pre-work, right? Your impact story or origin story. Start by adding what's most familiar and known within the organization. Okay? So when we talk about bring, we're going to get to the other 2 B's in a second, but these are the stories that you're already sharing with the world as they are, before touching the Institute, before doing anything else, okay? So we want to give you 2 minutes to jot down some bullet points, okay? And let me pause for a second. This is coming up for me right now. Mathina, why are you talking about story banking? Why are you talking about this the work, what we're talking about in this first half of day 1 and the end half of day 2, and we sandwiched it in this way, is because we don't want you to treat this as a one-off. I just learned how to tell a nice story. No, we want you to incorporate it into the fabric of how you do your work. And the structure helps you do that. You heard Amy talk about it at the beginning. Those of you who heard Amy share, We're retraining our brains and our minds to think about the impact of stories, because stories have an actual chemical impact on the brain. You tear up, you get emotional. That happens because we begin to mirror the feelings and the emotions of the person sharing the story. So if somebody's sharing a story and they get choked up, you often get choked up. That's the impact and the power of our stories. Ask me to geek out on it later, right? We can go into, the storytelling and the impact on the brain, and all the data and the research that's come out from that, right? And the work of Dr. Pack and some other psychiatrists and psychologists. The key here is understanding that these stories have impact, but we don't want them one off. We want them built into the fabric of your organization. Okay? I just want you to breathe that in for a second. All right. So I want you to take 2 minutes. I want you to jot down some bullets, right? Jot down some thoughts or ideas about some of the specific stories that you already tell, okay? So who is currently telling these stories? What stories are they currently telling that you can add to your bank? And then I want you to think about who those people are, jot them down, and then think about adding them to the story bank. We won't talk about time frame for now, okay? So don't worry, we're gonna put on some good music for you all, okay? And so that we can help you focus. Don't worry, no words, just instrumental, so that you can focus. And we'll be back in 2 minutes, okay? Okay, I think that's our time. I think that's our time. Before we move on to any of the other areas, the next section, right, on borrowing stories, I want to take a look at sorry, I don't know where that feedback's coming from. All right, I want to take a look at what Courtney dropped in the chat about preparing survivors, particularly when they're going to share testimony, physical and emotional safety concerns. And can I just say that my first gut reaction, Courtney, as I read that was, can we teach the legislators manners? Can we teach them manners? I had an honest reaction of, here we go, prepping survivors again for something that we should be addressing perpetrators for. Frustration. Okay, I'm back though. I'm back. All right, so one of the things that I would recommend in terms of working with, I'm not alone, Ren, thank you. With working with survivors with scenarios like this is to honestly, you have to prime them for the unintended consequence of an environment that isn't tailored for their concern or their needs. And talking through what it looks like for the day itself and to literally name for them, there's going to be some behavior that you're seeing that's going to be challenging for you, because ideally we want these individuals in this room to hang on your every word and to take action based on the stories that you and others like you are sharing with them. In reality, you may see a couple of different things. You may see an individual eating their lunch. You may see an individual talking to a peer or a colleague, probably about the previous testimony they just heard. And I want you to remember that none of these people can ever shape or frame your worth. All we're asking them to do is to hear about a moment of your experience. And then we're going to own what we can about what we share. Don't internalize their behavior or their actions as having value or meaning on you, but rather understanding that more than likely they've been in there for some. I'm always trying to give people grace. Sometimes they don't always deserve it, but I try. So these individuals may have been in this same room for the last 4 hours without a break. So you may see some of that come out. It has nothing to do with you. Prep them, allow them to kind of get a good sense. And then that way, prep them for the worst, and hopefully it'll be better than we thought it was, than we thought it would be once we enter the room. But you don't want to prep them for the best outcome and have it be opposite of that, because that can be even more disheartening. So those are some of the things we talk through. Talk them through what it would be like being in that space, the number of people that would be in the room, the constant movement, the shuffling that may be happening, especially if you're dealing with someone who may have been isolating themselves for a little while now in preparation to go back out into the world. That can be a lot to be in that environment. Prep them for the noise of the space, okay? Because I was surprised the first and only time I was ever in that. I was like, I thought it was supposed to be quiet, like TV shows, quiet in the courtroom, right? But it's often not. There's always this constant hum and murmuring. At least it was in my experience, but it may look different for other folks. So really having that conversation. And last, but certainly not least, model for them that experience. Have a day where you pull your team together and you all reenact what it can look like in that room with the legislators, and have people do all of those components, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, or the most likely scenario, so that they can actually practice and see it happen, because that really is painful to have somebody experience that. Anything else, team? Anything else that I have to kind of pull or lift up from the chat? Brecken, I'm asking for your support right now.
Yeah, folks are just reflecting on, this situation of survivor stories not being received with the care that they should be. And Dawn has been sharing about their experiences of survival and how they're writing a book now. And it looks like Lou just shared a message about Gabby. I'm thinking that's probably Gabby Petito, the influencer who was killed by her intimate partner a few years ago. And I think that about gets us up to speed.
Okay. Thank you, Brecken. I thank you all. Please keep the comments and the questions flowing as we move through the Institute, and we want to be able to pull lived experience and actually use your stories to help you frame your stories. Okay. Now let's go into the next part, right? And I'm going to give you some time again to prepare and unpack. And if you have questions about the bring, please drop those in the chat as well. Okay. So when we talk about borrowing stories, this is about using stories that others share about your work, right? These are your partners, your board members, your volunteers, your community allies, and partner organizations. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had police officers visit regularly because other officers were telling stories about the support that they experienced working with us. And I had one officer, because I was in the building with two different police units, missing persons, and the folks who investigate child sexual abuse. And I had one officer from the child sexual abuse investigative unit come into my office very frustrated, trying to understand youth language. And he shared with me that he was going in out of school, in middle school in particular, and one of the persons he was interviewing, some folks he was interviewing about the survivor story, was saying to him that the survivor was a dummy. I mentioned, remember, this is middle school, and the children kept saying, "Oh, they're a dummy, they're a dummy, they're a dummy," and he was taking that in as they were basically saying the person wasn't that smart. Well, if you've experienced any colloquial youthful language, particularly in urban settings, particularly where I was at the time in Baltimore, Maryland, that is not what it refers to. Okay? Not what it refers to. It refers to sexual behavior. And once we talked that through, and once we clarified and he realized how much more effective he could be by understanding some of the more phrases that were being utilized by young people at that time, particularly as it relates to intercourse or sex, then he would share his story, particular story of how he worked with us, with his peers and colleagues. So then more officers would come in, not on a like everyday basis, but way more than it was happening previously. Once I understood the impact of his story, I started using it when I was talking to other partners about what it was like to work with us. So who's telling stories about you? Who are your partner organizations and what are they saying? And if you're not sure, that's a project and an opportunity. But let's start by making a list of folks you regularly connect with and simply ask them, what stories do you tell about us? What do you talk about regarding our impact? All right, and when you do that, what do you say? All right, let's go ahead. Let's take our 2 minutes now. Jot down who you need to check in with, who's telling stories about you, and what might they be saying. Let's go ahead and start our 2-minute timer. All right. So I think that puts us at time. So I see a question from Lou in the chat about how can you, ask your partners their opinion without sounding like you're fishing for compliments. My recommendation is to be, I'm not sure where that feedback has come from, is to be truthful, of course, and say, we are currently, we're currently assessing and learning more from our partners about our impact, and where we can potentially even improve. So we understand that we may hear some great stories about us, and we also understand we may hear some challenging stories about us. But we want your experience. Can you tell us when somebody brings up our organization, or when somebody asks for a referral and you think of us? What do you tell people beyond what services we provide? Are there any particular pieces of impact that you share with insert people, right? So curate it in that way. Yeah. And remember, and I'm gonna say remember for Lou, because Lou mentioned that they have attended the Institute before. The framework that we're gonna go through in the Institute is still a way for you to ask for feedback from anyone, including your partners. You can use the aspects of the framework to frame your questions for folks. And if you're like, what framework, Mathina? Stick around. We have the rest of the day and tomorrow to get into it. So there are some great examples of borrowing stories, okay? A great example, for example, I just said example 4 times. Anyway, is Denim Day. For many of us, that isn't our own lived experience. How many people have ever, shared the story of Denim Day or done a program around it? Drop a D in the chat if you've ever done it, especially for those of us who are at dual agencies. I see some Y's and D's. Yep. Okay. So that's not our lived experience. Most of us are in the US, right? We're not even overseas. But we share the story of how Denim Day started, what it represents, right? That's a borrowed story that still supports our mission and connects to our work. All right, so our last piece is build. Does thinking about Denim Day help you all understand what I mean by borrowed stories? Is that helpful? If it is, drop a Y in the chat. Okay, good, good. All right, so the last piece of this segment, is the build, right? Build is about forecasting, okay? Thinking ahead to the next 3 to 6 months, or even years down the line, like you heard Amy mention earlier today, when they talked about the fact that the 50th anniversary is coming up in a couple of years. What stories do you need to start collecting now? What's your current focus, and what stories do you want to highlight going forward? Think about the best ways to capture these stories. Is it audio, video, written narratives, interviews? What stories aren't you telling, yet that could help shape your messaging and show the impact of your work? For example, many organizations are focusing on the current climate, the things on how our current climate impacts our work now and in the future. So what messages or stories do you need to be intentional about capturing to reflect that focus? Think about what voices or communities are missing from your story bank, and how can you authentically bring them in? Here's an example. I alluded to this earlier. I realized in my own community with the organization I was working with that we needed to prioritize our bilingual access in our prevention work, particularly with our Spanish-speaking populations. Our data showed that this is a clear need, but I needed more stories to support the funding request and show real impact. So I went into spaces where that need was most evident, and I began capturing stories intentionally to highlight and advocate for that specific change. Now, it took a couple of years, but eventually we were able to fund not just one advocate, but two advocates to work in our Spanish-speaking populations and communities. And while funding priorities have shifted over the years, they still currently at least have at least one advocate I know currently working in that organization, still working predominantly with young people who predominantly speak Spanish and have almost no English, yet they need access to the services our organizations provide. And that allowed that change to happen. But it had to happen with me curating, collecting the stories that are needed first. Okay? So I want you now to start thinking about the stories you have to build and that you need to move forward. Now, y'all know what we're going to do by now, right? Take 2 minutes to brainstorm. What stories do you need to build over the next 3 to 6 months or even years? How will you capture them? And then what voices are missing? Let's start our 2-minute timer. Okay, I think we are back. We are back. So hopefully, has this been helpful? You all just taking a couple of minutes to just jot down those initial thoughts. Is this helpful? I wanted to make sure. Oh, I don't know if that's somebody sharing or that's me echoing. Okay. Yes, yes. We have till 4 on Eastern both day. Okay, somebody's answering the question. All right. Okay, good, good, good. So I really wanted to make sure that we slow down here, because I know from feedback that this area, the how to implement the indexing and the story collection was something folks really just wanted more support with. And so I wanted to give this space to just breathe. Do we have any questions about using bring, borrow, and build framework? Any questions about using this? Drop them in the chat, or if you're like, there's too much to type, Mathina, raise your hand and the team will work on bringing you to the stage so that you can talk to me, okay? All right. As we take a moment to just read through and respond to what you're sharing, I want to thank you all for digging in. And I do want us to get excited about keeping it going, okay? All right, I'm not seeing too many questions. Not seeing too many questions. All right, feel free to keep dropping them, and that way we will continue to answer questions as we move through the Institute. So we've got a chance to really talk through the bring, borrow, and build framework. Now let's talk about what it means to create a sustainable culture of storytelling. And a sustainable culture means having the systems and infrastructure that allow you to carry your message forward consistently and intentionally. And we want to bring this work back to your agencies with excitement. And yes, sometimes that excitement might be mixed with a bit of frustration. That's normal. But it's important to remember that you do need buy-in from your full team. I always say top, down, left, right, from custodian to CEO. Everyone has to understand that they play a role in telling the story of the organization. And it's not just about the frontline staff who work directly with survivors. Even if you're at an agency that doesn't serve survivors directly, maybe you're a national or state coalition, you're still responsible for telling the stories of your partners and member organizations. I have to say that. Do I have any coalitions representing in the Institute today? Drop a C if you're representing a coalition, whether it's national or statewide. Okay, I'm seeing those C's drop in the chat. See, don't worry, I ain't forget about y'all. Got you too, okay? All right, so far we've covered a lot. And we've talked about why stories matter, how to craft them, and where and how to gather them. And if you're thinking, wait, we didn't talk about why stories matter, don't worry about that. I've asked you to take some time to watch some of that pre-work video. And if you watch your pre-work video, if you watch 9 minutes, drop a 9 in the chat. If you watch 20 minutes of the video, drop 20 in the chat. I just want to see kind of who's here. Most of you dropped all. Yeah, most of us watch all 20 minutes. I tell you, take the first 9 to 10 minutes. Yeah, okay. A couple people was like, oh, I did the 10 minutes, right? DVA is here. You watched the whole video. You cried a lot. Oh yeah, that video is always right in the heart, right? So, but we've also discussed how to build a story bank so that your process is accessible agency-wide. Dawn said, I will watch. Absolutely, Dawn. Watch it before tomorrow. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. And together, we've really started mapping out your culture roadmap, laying the foundation to make storytelling an integral part of your organization and your work. So let's take a quick break so you can stretch, and process all of this. If you have any additional questions, now is the perfect time to drop them in the chat, right? And I want you to use this time to respond, to share thoughts or insights, to look at your notes and really ask further questions like, okay, I heard Mathina say this, but I'm not really clear on what it is. But because when we come back, we'll talk about how to build storytellers throughout your organization. Remember, from custodian to CEO. And we'll explore what it takes to support everyone in stepping into this role and how to make it real in your day-to-day work. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's take another 5-minute break. Let's take another 5-minute break and we'll be right back.
We hope you've enjoyed your break. It's now time to return back to the 2025 NRCDV Storytelling Institute. We welcome back our facilitator, Mathina James Brightful.
Okay, I hope you all had a good stretch. I stood, I walked in place, I stretched myself, because we're about to get into the meat of today. So if you thought it was yummy and good before, strap in, okay? So that was our last scheduled break of the session. So I do want to invite you, take care of yourself, do what's necessary, grab your water when you need it, okay? Grab a snack if you need it. We wanted to give you a great deal of content today, but we didn't want to keep you for 17 hours. So if you need to take a moment to step away, stand or stretch, please take what you need to do and really take care of yourself, right? Now, let's continue this conversation we've been talking a lot about regarding bringing storytelling into the culture of your organization and really institutionalizing it so that it becomes a core part of how you operate, right? But what barriers do you anticipate when it comes to getting buy-in for this work? I want you to go ahead and drop some thoughts in the chat. What challenges do you think might come up when trying to get people to say yes to bringing storytelling forward in your organization? And if you're following along, we're now going to page 22 in your workbook, okay? There's some prompts there to help you really think this through. What are some barriers you anticipate regarding bringing this into your organization? Time and capacity of staff. Yep, good one. We'll talk about some of that also. All right. Any other barriers, or y'all just reading the screen like that's it right there? Ethics, HIPAA concerns, very much so. Yeah, there are a number of very real challenges that we anticipate when it comes to getting buy-in. And naming them here together is an important first step in thinking about how we can address them intentionally, right? Team buy-in, feelings of manipulation and manipulative tactics to get funding, because of lack of valuing storytelling, ethical considerations, impact, investment in time, role relative to the larger organization, confidentiality, victims' trust, ethics, of course. Our legal counsel advises us away from most forms of storytelling because besides straight data. I have so many questions. Is it Marissa? So many questions. And what's that? Not funding for high production, like videos. Don't let the pre-video scare you, right? Not every video needs to have high quality or anything like that. We'll talk about that in a second. To see the value, possibilities. People want happy endings and not messy stories. Ethics. We have so many questions. All right, so those are all very, very, very real. And I'll tell you, and I hope, I'm just gonna say one of our team members, when we first met many, many moons ago, asked me the question, and I've taken it with me forward ever since. We're talking almost 10 years. And that was, well, my story isn't finished, right? It's not done. It doesn't have a pretty bow on the end of it, to speak to whoever it is I just read that said that. And I said, when we talk about the resolution, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, when we talk about the resolution for your story, that doesn't mean happy ending. Have you all read like Twilight series, Harry Potter series? There are never endings. They were just cliffhangers. And look how famous all of those things have become. I say that in a tongue-in-cheek way of saying this. There are usually no endings when people are still moving forward with the stories. Even if somebody is a victim and their life has ended as a result of the incident that we're talking about, the people that love them are still carrying their stories forward. So it's not over. It's just, where is it now? And so I don't want you to think about the story as needing this pretty happy ending or bow. More people actually want the stories of the underdogs. It's why our culture is the way it is when it comes to movies, books, things of that nature. We actually want more of that. And people actually connect with that better than they do with something that's pretty wrapped up and nice and neat. Okay. They want to hear how the story relates to them having a good outcome. Dominique, say more about that. Like they themselves can have a good outcome, or that they themselves can do something about it. Okay, all right. So one barrier that often comes up is the fear of public speaking. Does anybody have a fear of public speaking here? If you do, drop an F in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. Kayla, you just dropped an F in the chat. Kay said F, Jacqueline said F. Right? Okay, Jocelyn. So it's real, right? And some of us, depends on the day. Some of us still have to do it. I've been speaking professionally for well over 20 years, right? And people never believe I get nervous. I'm like, I still get nervous. The more new I am to an audience, the more nervous I actually get, okay? Sweat is real. So it's not about that you have no fear, right? Because many people believe that they aren't good at it, that they're not sure what to say, or that they'll feel overwhelmed by their nerves. And those are all real things. And they're tools and strategies that we can use to overcome many of those ways that our excitement becomes nervousness rather than excited energy. And it is important to remember that people don't have to speak publicly to contribute to stories, okay? They can share them with a supervisor or directly add them to the story bank without being the one to have to share publicly themselves, okay? Then a point of contact could, after they shared it with somebody else, then the point of contact could review and then shape those stories for someone else to share, like an executive director, like a board member or peer. So the fear doesn't have to prevent valuable stories from being included. And I want you all to hold space for that. Does that make sense to everyone? If that makes sense, drop an S in the chat real quick. Okay, I see those S's lighting up chat. All right. If public speaking is a barrier, create a more seamless way for staff or community members to contribute their stories, really allowing others who feel more comfortable to then maybe share them publicly when needed or in other platforms or avenues. Okay. Another consideration, many staff members are also survivors. And I had one participant once shared that they didn't want to shift the focus away from clients by sharing staff stories. I've seen this play out a number of different ways over my career, right? But at the core of it, I believe that there is a way to do this with integrity and ethics. And when we say we want to center survivor voices, that includes survivors who work within our organizations. And we have to be intentional about not erasing someone's survivor identity just because they also hold a staff role. We don't want their professional identity to completely overshadow their lived experience if they choose to share it. That does require you all to have thoughtful conversations about the ethics, values, and organizational policies. If your organization has set a precedent of not wanting staff to center or share their survivor stories, that's something that you have to share openly ahead of time, now, if you haven't already done so that people are making a decision that's clear and empowering for themselves, right? If you're open for staff to share their own survivor stories, then and you want it done in a particular context, then you have to name that. We ask survivors on a regular basis to trust us. We ask survivors on a regular basis to share some of the most challenging experiences, whether we're asking them to do it in therapy, to get access to resources, to talk to policymakers, to get access to a particular tool or system that they may need. We ask them to do it on a consistent basis. So we have to be brave enough to have these conversations amongst ourselves so that we're operating with the highest level of integrity. We have to avoid, okay, before I even say that, I want to say something I was just dropped out of that. I see how stories and narratives are valued when it can push or affirm a position or policy that is grounded in a deficient framing to justify punishment or profit approach instead of care or community-driven approaches. Okay. And are you saying that in terms of naming that you see it happen more so for that than care of community-driven approaches? I'm just curious. Context there. Marissa says, do you mean to be clear about the staff disclosure policy in the hiring process? Oh, I mean, yes, in the hiring process, in the onboarding process, in the recruitment process. And then have those conversations well once after someone's on staff or on team, because here's the reality. We can't act like somebody only comes in as a survivor into our organizations. I don't know about y'all, but I've been working in this field long enough to see people already working at agencies that focus on gender-based violence, human trafficking, child sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, that then become a survivor after they've begun working at our organizations. They experience an incident or a series of incidents or years of violence and abuse while working in an agency that centers the care and support of people who are going through what they're going through. So we have to have these conversations. It's part of the ethics of doing this work. I work with policymakers and I'm pushing that knowledge and policy must be co-created and informed by, yes, okay, yeah, absolutely. I see exactly what you're saying. Now, I do want us to name, right, as we talk about these barriers, that we also have to avoid exploiting people's trauma. Survivors should never feel pressured. They should feel that it's always their choice in terms of how or if they share their story. They shouldn't feel or maybe made to feel pressured that to share their story is the price that they pay for receiving services or support. Right? Most of the survivor stories I've shared came from individuals who were years beyond the immediate clinical needs and had intentionally chosen to use their voice publicly. When working with survivors who want to advocate publicly, we must. And I told y'all, I'm usually going to invite you, but there are certain times I'm just going to tell you, okay? And this is one of those times. We must discuss support systems, right? Such as reassessing counseling or additional services. I saw a few folks share in the chat that in the course of writing their books or having a client who may be writing a book, that they have moments of being triggered, that going through capturing their experience again is really challenging. And I've worked with enough authors who happen to be survivors that is one of the things I tell them. You might want to step back into a therapeutic relationship with a professional as you write this story, because other things start showing up or things start coming up. Your incident may have happened 15 or 20 years ago and you're writing about it now, but now you also have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and that brings up different feelings and emotions and stories. Are y'all with me so far? If you're with me so far, drop a Y in the chat. Okay, all right. I'm just checking in because I think this is one of the most critical portions of what we build here in the Institute, right? Organizations need to be absolutely clear and intentional about this. How do you support survivors on staff, and how do you support survivors who receive services but want to contribute their story? And too often, organizations don't address this at all. But as more survivors step into advocacy, technical assistance roles, we can't avoid these conversations. There's a quote by Zora Neale Hurston that I love. And the quote says, if you are silent about your pain, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it. So we must protect the integrity of our work. And this means creating options for people to retract or update their story, for clarifying what's confidential versus what's anonymous, and working with legal teams to determine permissions and consent processes. Your legal team isn't driving the storytelling. Your legal team should be supporting how you share your stories. Okay? Consider whether contributions or contributors, whether they sign a permission form, whether there are options to withdraw stories. And I always say you need an option to withdraw stories, right? And and how identifying information is protected. Okay? All of those things are critical. Okay? Now, another approach is to honor the collective voices that survivors carry when you're thinking about how to share these stories, right? I often say, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. Even when I share personal stories, I hold space for the many voices that I represent. It was my go-to answer for when someone would ask me questions about, well, have you been through this or have you been through that? I will always talk about, and that's when I roll in a statistic, quick, fast, and in a hurry, because while I may be the person standing in front of you, I'm representing thousands of others. Some whom I've talked to and some whom I haven't. You don't want to have, or you don't have to, let me say it that way, you don't have to publicly name a story as your own to share it as truth. That's one of the protections that you can offer to your staff, to the survivors that you work with, or even you yourself. You can say, I knew a survivor, or I know of someone, without centering yourself. The key is the message, not the ownership, unless you make the ownership the key. And in some spaces, it is. Some people, for them, the ownership of their story and being seen is critical to the story itself. For some people, they just want the concept of the messaging or the idea of their story to be represented in a larger landscape. A different but related barrier is disconnection from the mission. Sometimes you have board members, volunteers, staff, or even an executive director who becomes disconnected. And when that happens, reconnecting them to the mission and purpose is essential. I did warn y'all that we was about to get into the heavy, right? I did tell y'all that. I didn't I? If I told y'all that, be like, say, just give me a thumbs up. If I did tell y'all we was gonna get into the heavy, that to strap in. I did. Okay, all right. I see the thumbs up. Okay. Because we have to remember, it's not a question of if we tell stories, it's when and it's how. Even if your agency decides that staff won't share personal stories, how do you pass the mic so that survivors and impacted communities can tell theirs? The story must be told. And as you think about barriers, consider how to overcome them with intention. So this includes revisiting organizational values, discussing ethics and legal considerations, supporting staff and survivors holistically, addressing disconnection from the mission. How do we reignite the passion and purpose that first brought us to this work? If you've ever worked with me in a facilitation setting, sometimes I work with national folks at national organizations, coalition level, and one of the things, and sometimes we're removed from the day-to-day work. We're not advocates working on the front lines often. We may have done that work for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, and now we are more on the administrative side of the world. Okay, I know I've got a few folks on here that connect with that. And as a result, I often start those facilitated conversations by asking you all to think about a specific survivor story or experience that you hold dear. I've got several that have been with me through my journey that I don't let go of, that I hold on to, and that I center to help me remember and realign when I get frustrated, when it's beginning to feel impossible. And when we integrate values and operationalize storytelling, we ensure that the practice honors people's experiences and moves our mission forward with integrity and care. Okay? Any questions about barriers? Any questions or thoughts about barriers? Um, okay. Trying to see. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Dawn. And that's one of the things I'm often looking for those common grounds. So I'll give you an example of how I find common ground for folks, right? When I feel like some people who may not have experienced it feel disconnected. I actually had at a community gathering one time where they brought us in to talk about human trafficking. I had somebody yell at myself and my co-facilitator about just get those prostitutes out of here. And they were very angry and very loud. So I do a couple of things especially if I know I'm going into an environment where people may be disconnected. I always start with a connection exercise. I remember doing this with police officers one time. I walked in, I said, I'm just trying I don't know what I said to actually start, but this is the actual exercise that I said. How many of you can think of something that you could do 10 years ago that you can't do today? I get the answers. And I remember doing this with the police, and they were laughing, cracking jokes on each other, and they were naming things. And then I moved on, and because I was doing elder abuse at that time, I actually said to them, how many of you can think of something that you can do right now that you don't know if you'll be able to do 10 years from now? Just to get them to humanize, because they're not elders, to get them to humanize that we're all aging and we all experience certain things. And then I went on to connect it to the larger landscape of elder abuse, for example. So think about ways when you're going into environments that you anticipate may potentially be hostile or just disconnected. For folks that may be disconnected, find ways of humanizing it. And that might mean starting with an experience or a story that isn't directly connected to this work. How do you harness those personal stories? Personal stories from survivors, so on and so forth, because I've been doing this work long enough that I get those stories, I hear them from folks, right? And then I also have used story banks. I have not used them, and hence why I started building them, in order to capture those pieces. And sometimes I just talk, right? And now with the advent of AI, might just talk to the AI and have them craft the overall messaging. I'm gonna talk to y'all about AI, use it later. The overall messaging so that I can remember, and then I go in and I type in the components that I know I need for the story to have, for it to resonate the way it should, and then I bank it and I put it in the story bank. Let me know if that answers your question. All right, so here's what we're gonna do, because whatever your agency values, right, you have stories that point to those values and that you share them consistently is what's critical. So whatever your agency values, you should have. I'm going to ask you, do you? Based on what your agency values, do you have stories that point to those values that you share consistently? That's how you integrate and operationalize the values of your organization through storytelling. All right? So think about those values and how they show up. I want you to ask yourself, how is your organization embodying the messages you want to bring forward? What value systems live within your organization or your agency, and how are they being shared and reflected? Think about your team meetings. Do you create space to ask for good news or powerful moments from clients or from the work as a whole? Because that's a storytelling action. You center storytelling as a value by intentionally creating those moments. So for example, when we were talking about barriers, people talked about the capacity of staff. It doesn't mean you have to everybody spend an hour writing stories and putting them in the bank. It means, hey, let's save 10 minutes at our staff meeting to ask that question. Does anybody have any good news or a powerful moment that you experienced while doing the work that you want to share as a whole? Now, the structure part of that is to have somebody designated already prior to that moment to then capture that. Maybe that's when you turn on, the audio recorder in Teams, right? Or maybe that's when you use your AI translator to capture those notes from that moment so that it makes it a little easier for you all to follow up on it. Or maybe you just good old fashioned, you got that one person, right, who takes their pen and no paper and they're writing it down or they're typing it to capture the stories. The point is to capture that moment after asking the question, right? Someone designed on your team to really capture that messaging and put in the story bank. And that's how you operationalize that storytelling. You create the structured moments to listen for the stories. You assign clear follow-up and accountability, and you do it by increasing the cadence and the frequency by which you seek out and share those stories. How are you intentionally elevating voices that might otherwise be missed? That's what we mean when we talk about operationalizing storytelling, turning values into everyday actions and systems. Now, before we hop into this next very, very, very yummy part that I know y'all gonna want to take notes on, I do want to ask the team if there's anything that we need to lift up from the chat, because I'm trying to keep us on time and not spend a lot of time looking at the chat. But is there anything that we need to lift up from the chat at this time?
Thanks, Mathina. Yes, Courtney did ask if you have any suggestions for humanizing stories during legislative hearings that have a 2 to 3 minute time limit.
I sure do, and I'm about to give you the framework for it. The way I started really crafting these was because I had a survivor who's a really good friend of mine. And she's a sexual assault survivor, and she wanted to tell her story legislatively. And I had her come and speak at an event. And the way she was delivering the story, I was like, oh, this is not going to work. Oh, okay. And so we talked about it after the fact, and she's an author. She published a book talking about her experience as well. And so we talked about how to do it in 2 to 3 minutes. I think this is my sweet spot. I can help you craft an impactful story in 2 to 3 minutes, right? And I'm gonna give you the framework for that, how to make that happen. Thank you so much for that question, and thank you, Brecken, for that. Anything else? I see you're muted. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to uplift. Ren shared a reminder about clinging to the good moments, which I think is just so critical in this work for sure. Just wanted to uplift that, but otherwise, I'm not seeing any other questions.
Thank you so much, Brecken. I love when Brecken comes on too, because it's like my voice gets a break and y'all get to hear another voice. So thank you so much for that, Brecken. And thank you all for your comments and what you're sharing in the chat. NRCDV has developed some frameworks and tools to help you do this work so that you don't have to figure it out alone, in addition to the Institute, right? We thought carefully about what resources that NRCDV already has in place so that we didn't need to recreate or repeat that content here in the Institute. And then we considered what new tools and content can we bring forward to help you all highlight the messaging you need most. For example, NICDB has excellent resources already available to help prepare survivors to share their stories. I mentioned that we're going to talk about this, where they are, whether they are clients or former clients, and to be able to support them in deciding if and how they want to share. So we're going to drop these links to these resources in the chat for you, but they're also in your workbook. Okay, in your workbook, these resources also live. So the resources include preparing survivors for public speaking, how advocates can prepare for public speaking, sharing your story of intimate partner or domestic violence, and crafting a message for impact. All of those actually do live in that resource guide for you all, and we want you all to have that. Okay. All right. We wanted to make sure that these foundational tools to build on everything you're learning here today and over the next 2 days were there for you. So along with these resources, we're also going to introduce a custom framework designed to help you craft a highly engaging story step by step, whether you need it for 2-3 minutes or 30 minutes, all right? So if you're ready for this, if y'all are really ready, drop an R in the chat. If you're excited for the resources and the framework to craft a compelling story, drop an R in the chat. Yes, okay, I love seeing those R's. So most of you already know the basics of storytelling. Things like the fact that there's a 3-part structure is classic. You have the beginning, you have the middle, and you have the end. Or the 5 elements of a story, okay? The 5 elements of a story are character, plot, conflict, the setting, and of course, the resolution. So we're not going to focus on these fundamentals during the Institute, right? I wanted to say them out loud in the event that you've never, ever heard those before. But most of us have listened to a fairy tale or a story rhyme at some point, or we read it, we've read up on different types of stories. So you already know those things. So instead, right? And I do want to say, if those things feel completely unfamiliar, then I'm going to suggest checking out some of the resources that we've shared and maybe taking a basic storytelling or public speaking course to really solidify that foundation. Today, instead, the framework we're going to explore really blends what we know about stories' impact on the brain. And if you did any of the previous, what's the word I'm looking for? Any of the previous videos that we talked about, then you kind of know what I'm referencing. Like if you watch the whole 20-minute video, you'll see when we break this down how that lives in that video. All right. So we're going to talk, so we're blending how stories impact the brain as well as the timeless story arcs that we've seen throughout history. Because the goal is to craft a framework that's memorable, that includes the essential anatomy of a story, and still leaves room for your unique voice. And that's how we develop what we call the NRCDV framework. Okay. The framework we're walking through has 5 parts. Name the harm, respond, change, the difference, and the vision. If you're following along in your workbook, you want to go to page 23. Okay? So I'm going to spend time on each piece because I want you to really understand how to use this as a practical checklist when you're crafting your stories. Right? First is the N, which represents name the harm. What is the person, the client or central figure in your story? What are they overcoming? Even if you're sharing a combined story that represents multiple people, you still want to center it. We know many survivors have experienced multiple forms of harm, but we want to highlight a particular part of their journey because what you're trying to do is summarize somebody's 20 years in 2 minutes. And so you're not going to be able to talk about every single thing that happened in their experience. You just can't do it in the time that we have. So instead, you want to ask yourself, have I named what they're overcoming? Have I painted a clear picture of the challenge that they faced? Okay? That's the N. That's the name the harm. Okay? If you haven't picked up on it yet, NRCDV is so that it makes it easy for you to remember the framework. Okay? So that's name the harm. That's the first part. Next is the R. The R is respond. How did you meet or connect with this client? And what services did your agency or organization provide? Now, remember, for my coalition folks, right? For my folks who aren't working directly with survivors, you're going to do the same thing, but instead of individual client, you're going to think member organization. I want to let that marinate and sink in. Okay. Now, Also under the R, how did they reach out to you? Did they reach out through your hotline? Was it social media? Was it a community partner? And then what did you do to support them? That's what the R talks about. It's how you responded to the harm that occurred for this person. Let me give you an example. They called your hotline, they needed shelter, and you provided it. They reached out and needed legal support, and you connected them with an attorney. That's how you responded. So this section is all about showing how you stepped in and met their need. Okay. If you're tracking with me so far, drop a T in the chat. Okay. All right, I'm seeing the T. Okay. Then now let's move to the C in change. As a result of how you responded, as a result of your response, what changed for the client? What changed for them? What are they, or where are they now? Let me give an example. Because of the legal services provided, the client was able to regain custody of their children and is now safely reunited with them. That is the change. Now, this isn't a story yet, okay? I'm just asking you to think about the components that need to be woven into the story. So the C, the change, is the tangible outcome from your intervention. Now, I know you're thinking, Mathina, all of our interventions aren't clean. We usually don't just provide one service. That's fine. Absolutely. Usually they're money things. They may have initially come in and connected and needed shelter. Then you did some case management work, and now they are actually being provided with not only legal, but clinical services. I get it. All right. So map that out. And remember, we can't talk about their entire lived experience. You're talking about 20, 30, 40 years of living, usually. We have to center it in some way. Okay? All right? Now, the D is the difference. What difference was made because of the listener's support? I'm probably going to say this again, but let me just highlight it right now. My perspective on this and how I teach this when I'm working with organizations is you are the sidekick. You are the help, not the hero. Let me take a water. Let me say it again. You are the help. Your organization is the help. It represents the system. You are not the hero. Who is the hero? Everybody drop in the chat. Who's the hero? Who's the hero of the story? Thank you, Allison. I see the survivor is. Okay. Now, for my folks who come from communities where being called the help is triggering, I completely get it. I'm there with you. Okay. But in this context, you are the help, not the hero. In the context of this work, for my survivors who also happen to work at the agency. Remember, I talked all about rooting for and celebrating and acknowledging and being intentional about your opportunity to share your survivor story. In the context of what we're sharing, unless we're talking about your story, you are the help, you are not the hero. Okay? Are y'all okay with that? Let me check the chat. Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. I'm just making sure that we are centering the actual hero. Okay. Now, so that's why we have to name what's going on with the client, right? That's why you can talk about how you respond. You can talk about what changed for the client as a result of how you respond and them taking action. They often have to be involved in this process, right? I would say 9 times out of 10, or as Beyonce says, 10 times out of 9, they have to be involved in the process. And then the last two components of the framework, begins pulling your audience in by speaking directly to them. This is a question about policy. Remember the policy question we heard earlier? How do we tie it in? This is where you start pulling the listener in. And then let's use policy as an example as the listener. So the D stands for what difference was made because of the listener's support or action. So this could be funders, volunteers, partners, even the broader community. Let me give this example. So let's say when we get to the D part of the story, then we say, because of your $100 donation, we covered 1 hour of an attorney's time that this client was able to be reunited with their family. Do you see those cross threads? You're connecting the change to the listener's contribution. Because let's be honest, every single one of us listens to the same favorite radio station. Y'all know what that station is? If you know what that station is that everybody listens to, drop it in the chat. All over the world. I don't care where you are. In the most rural communities, in the most popular metropolitan communities, we all listen to the same radio station. Do y'all know what it is? I got a couple of yeses, but I don't know if that's about my question I'm asking right now. I'll tell y'all what it is. The radio station that we all listen to. Sometimes TV and Technicolor. It's not Pandora. It's not Spotify. It's not NPR. It's WIIFM. WIIFM. Y'all are catching it, okay? You know what that station stands for? What's in it for me? Some people are like, no, Madonna, don't say that. That means we're really selfish. It's just honest. When you look at a group picture that you knew you were in, when you look at when your staff all take a picture together and you look at the picture once it's produced, who are you looking for? Now, you may enjoy seeing what everybody else is doing, but you always look for yourself. Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. You're looking for you. Thank you, Dawn. You're looking for you. We do the same thing with our listening. And usually it allows us to then activate some level of action. So policymakers want to know how it impacts their constituents. Donors want to know the result of their investment. Volunteers want to know the difference that they make. So between C and D, you're saying, here's what changed for this person, and here's how you helped make that possible. I'm taking some time and breathing on this one because this is the next section that people are like, I'm trying to say that again. All right, and then this is the first year that y'all are gonna be able to go back and like watch this video. So hey friend, welcome back. Okay. However, we have to really spend some time here with folks. So that's the difference between C and D. C is here's what changed for this person. D is here's how you help make that possible. Okay. All right, let's get into the V. So V stands for vision. What do you want the listener to do now? What is their call to action? They just listen to you share all this information. Now what? So here's an example. Help us carry this message forward and shift culture by insert action. Call your legislator, donate this, go to your local fire department and ask for this, go to your child's school and find out if they have programming related to this content. Help us support more survivors by, or help us support more survivors like, let's say the survivor story I was just telling was about Mary. I think I used that name earlier. Anybody here named Mary? I'm not talking about you if you are, okay? I'm just pulling a random name, okay? Or let's use Maria. Maria is my sister's name. Anybody here named Maria? I don't know. Anyway, help us support more survivors like Mary by passing House Bill 679. Always make sure that the listener, reader, consumer knows exactly what you want them to do with the story you just shared. All right, I'm going to pause. What questions do you have about the framework? I want you to drop them in the chat, and I want you to, if you feel like you need to, raise your hand. Jacqueline said, that's powerful. Raise your hand if you feel like, I know I'm a thought and I need to talk this through with you. All right. I just really, this is that core piece of the framework. So before I give you time to practice, to think about the stories you all shared, I want to make sure that I can answer questions for you before we go into practice.
We did have one question, Mathina, that
Yes,
it's not
please.
necessarily about the framework, but it is about how do we navigate language restrictions that we might be facing while
Mm.
also wanting survivors to be able to tell their story freely.
Child, this is all the area we all are navigating this current journey. Here's what's been showing up for me. Okay. And use it as you can and see fit. What I've been asking myself is there's no way to get around what somebody's race is. It is what it is. There's no way to get around someone's gender identity. It is what it is. There's no way to get around someone's legal status. It is what it is. What I will say is ask yourself, how can I center other parts of this person's reality, identity, or lived experience that still honors their journey and their story? There's no way to get around certain aspects, but can you ask yourself, instead of shutting down and say, I can't say anything, what can I say? How can I lift up? How can I center the other parts of this person's identity? Because what we could ask ourselves is, how have we created for ourselves having to live on only one part of this person's identity as the dominant driver of their story? It's a curiosity we're now positioned to have to explore. Right? So that's why I lift up for you all. And if y'all figure it out any differently, call me. Okay? Call me. So I hope that's helpful. Anything else, Brecken? Any other questions that you all have? Anything that we may have missed or not seen?
Not seeing other questions, just it sounds like the framework is helpful to folks. And
Mhm.
Jacqueline says vision is the last thing we think about, mostly just want to be heard, not really thought about action. So I think that's a really helpful piece to remember to tie into your story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brecken. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So here's the thing. If there are no additional questions about the framework right now, then it's time for us to put this into some practice. And you're going to take some time to review the stories that some of you did submit. Yay, thank you. And as I was listening to them, I found the most common refrain popping up. And this is not on the slide, so I'm just going to tell y'all. Okay, just write it down. And that is, when we ask for a story, we got the services that were provided at the organization, we got some history about the organization, or we got a challenge that was being faced, but there was no story. And so as you all think about it, and some of you, those of you who submitted a story on the Padlet, yay, first off. And secondly, I want you to go back and listen to it, because that's going to be some of your work for today, is to go back and listen to it, go back and sit with it a little bit and ask yourself, are they the first two things that we didn't even teach on today? Is there a middle, beginning, end? Is there the 5 components of a story? Right? And then think about it as it relates to what we've been talking about today, and in particular, this framework that we've addressed and touched base on, right? So I want you all right now to work on the story you either came in with today, or choose one that you feel inspired to work on after everything we've talked about so far. I want you to use the framework, right? All 5 components: name the harm, respond, change, difference, or vision. And apply it to your story. And let me say this before we take about 7 minutes to work on this. You don't have to tell the story using the exact linear framework, okay? But we did organize the framework in the most likely order of the story. Make sense? More than likely, you're going to name the harm first. More than likely, you're going to talk about what you did and then how it changed the result for the client. More than likely, you'll speak to the difference that the listener made and then talk about what you want them to either do next as a result of having heard what you shared. More than likely. Can you move these around? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just saying more than likely it's going to be in that direction. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. We're going to give you 7 minutes to work. And then we're going to come back together. And I'd like to invite a few of you to raise your hands, and we're going to bring you on stage as a panelist, and you're going to have to accept you're going to have to accept the invitation in order to share, because we would love to hear from a few of you with what you've been working on as your story. Okay. All right. Now, as you prepare to work on your story and take these 7 minutes, I want to reiterate what I just shared in order. What was that? I'm sorry. Was that the team? I can't see y'all. Okay. I want you to remember your story should have some form of a central figure. Okay. There, again, you've got to have that overcoming the hurdle in the name. I want you to remember to bridge the message with the action that you want folks to take, the vision that you want people to embrace. Okay. So use that framework to rewrite or shape your story. It's in your workbook. You can follow along there. And then if you like, we can put it back up on the screen for you as a reference while you work. Okay. Any final questions? Okay, let's go ahead. Let's turn our music on. You have 7 minutes. And when we come back, we want to hear from you. Okay, let's start wrapping up those thoughts. I want you all to come back. I'd really love to hear from you. This is your chance as you put things together and with everything you've learned so far. I would love if I had a couple of folks who would be willing to just raise their hand and share. We'll invite you to the stage so that we can hear your voice. You can share with us what this experience was like, maybe a little bit of your story. I'm not trying to ask for too much, but definitely gonna. And if you don't want to unmute, then feel free to drop it in the chat. Um, but strong hint is during this time where folks unmuted that we got Amy's initial story and was able to workshop it until Amy went back and did some amazing work to produce the video that you all ended up seeing earlier today. Okay. Alrighty. Any questions? Was it challenging for folks? If it was challenging for you, drop a 1 in the chat. Couple of 1. If you was like, yeah, it was cool, it was good, drop a 2 in the chat. Okay, Katie, no problem. No problem. The team will support me in lifting it up. They'll find it and make sure that we get it there. You like using the framework? Okay. Thank you, Courtney. I love the 1.5. I love that 1.5. Yes. All right. Any other questions, thoughts? Because we're nearly done with day 1. We purposely reserved this time to do some deep dive unpacking with you regarding the story that you've drafted and making this come to life for you. Any questions that you either have or curiosities that you're like, I'm still not quite sure about this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Might need to let it sit for a bit. I understand that. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why we didn't want to dump everything on day 1 and have you all sitting here for hours. Well, you're already here for hours, but I'll say for like 8+ hours. And we wanted to give you all some breathing room. So thank you for lifting that up. Oh, it won't let you cut and paste from Word? Oh no. Katie, you can always raise your hand to come off mute and verbally share your story. I'm just saying. You often forget the call to action. Woohoo! Katie raised her hand. Thank you, Katie. We'll get you pulled up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for this. It's been so helpful. And this has been something that I've been working on with my organization. Stay as attendee, join as panelist, stay as an attendee. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. So this is something that we've been working on just because we have an archive of survivor stories that all feel a little bit like trauma porn. And so we've been working on making them a little more well-rounded and giving some of the survivors a little bit of back and forward story around the incident that may have happened to them so that it doesn't define their whole world. So this is one that we've been working on. I'll just go ahead and read it. It's more of a story than it is a narrative, just to kind of give some context to that. And this one's about Laura. So Laura lived with confidence, an easy laugh, surrounded by friends and a caring family. She was completing online classes toward earning her CNA certification, and her future hummed with potential. Still, beneath her brightness lived the quiet fear of being alone, of not finding a partner, of never getting married. When a friend introduced her to Jack, a longtime acquaintance, Laura held a tender hope. Perhaps this man could be the one. Jack secured her love with flowers, daily calls, and constant praise. His presence was consuming, flattering, intoxicating. Laura had never felt so cared for. 6 months later, she said yes to his proposal, not just to the man, but to the promise of being cherished and protected. She felt lucky to have found someone so devoted and was excited to start their life together. At first, Jack's jealousy masqueraded as devotion. When he questioned her visits with her family, Laura withheld her concern. She told herself he just wanted to spend all of his time with her. But after the wedding, his need to possess her became overwhelming. His romantic ways became smothering. He controlled who she saw, what she did, and how she spoke. One night, after visiting her mother, Laura came home and was met with not questions, but with his fists. Stunned, she suppressed her shame. The next morning, Jack wept and begged, blaming his violence on fear of abandonment. Laura, her heart not ready to leave, accepted his apology but began to pull inward, disassociating from her own instincts in order to protect him from the judgment of others. Years passed, 15 of them. Laura became a guardian of silence. She withheld the truth from her friends, severed ties with her family, and reserved every ounce of energy to keep Lexi, their 6-year-old daughter, safe. She lived in constant watchfulness, tailoring her behavior to pacify Jack, to guard her child from the violence that had become routine. One night, when Lexi fell ill with a high fever, Laura focused on comforting her, neglecting to make him dinner. Jack erupted. He stormed into Lexi's room and dragged her from their daughter's bed by her foot, berating her for being a terrible wife for ignoring his needs. Fearing for Lexi, Laura tried to de-escalate the situation, heading to the kitchen to prepare a meal. But Jack struck her in the face. This time, something broke loose inside of her, a final boundary shattered with her bloodied face. With one tooth gone and her body trembling, Laura ran with Lexi to the neighbor's house to whatever safety she could find. The police were called, but even then, fear held on. She declined to press charges, haunted by the risk of retaliation. But the officer left a number, DSVS, that's my organization. Clutching to nothing but the need to protect her daughter, Laura called the helpline and was immediately placed into emergency shelter with Lexi. The DSVS advocate met her bruised and blinking in disbelief. With quiet strength, they crafted a safety plan. Within days, Laura and Lexi were in long-term shelter. Within weeks, they had a home, a deposit paid, rent covered, a healing surgery for her infected tooth scheduled. And for the first time in years, Laura felt the smallest stir of something unfamiliar, liberation and the chance to breathe. The transition has been hard. Lexi wakes in the night. Laura's body still reacts to shadows, but the judgment she once feared from her family and friends has been replaced with arms wide open. She's rebuilding, relearning, reclaiming. Laura has completed her CNA certification and returned to work and a life of independence. She is moving forward with the divorce. Jack still calls, he threatens, pleads, promises. But Laura no longer reserves her truth. She sees a danger now. She protects her boundaries. She protects Lexi. She protects herself. Each time she visits DSVS, her advocate notices the change, her smile unreserved, her presence grounded, her laughter and light returning. Laura walks forward with her head high, each step a promise to guard, not just her child, but her own peace and her right to live free from fear. And that's it.
Hold on, let me get my keep the clapper around. That was really great, Katie. Look, I hope you're seeing the emojis flying up.
I do. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, that was really, really, really good. Let me ask before I give any feedback, did you have any questions for me about what you shared?
I don't think I have questions. I think it's more like this is a long story, right? So this is not a story that's for everybody. This is a story that'll live on our website, may not be something that we use for social media or when we're talking to donors specifically. And then there would be an ask, obviously, at the end of, depending on who we're presenting this to. But yeah, what are your thoughts on sort of making it a longer narrative as opposed to just having it be a story that, because most of the time we do meet these clients, they've just walked through the door, their face is bloodied or they are missing the tooth, right? And we don't get the whole story about who they are before this all happened and their wants and desires.
Yeah, we don't get that usually until well after they've gotten to a different level of their healing journey where we can get a better picture of what their life was like prior to the incident that may have brought them in. So I definitely hear you. And I love that you intentionally said, I know this is longer. This is where we're planning on using it. And that's one of the things that we often don't get a chance to talk about is how you let these live in these other spaces. So that's excellent. I love it. I think it's strong, it's solid, it has very clear pieces and components in it. I would say even if you're planning to let it live on like the website or maybe you take an excerpt and put it in the newsletter and ask them to go to the website to read the full story, I still want to encourage you in that full story to have some kind of call to action. Typically when things live on our website, for example, The call to action is just more widely community driven versus like, oh, I know I'm talking to a donor, or I know I'm talking to a policymaker, or I'm talking to a peer or colleague. So I think adding that piece won't make it any longer. It might be 1 or 2 sentences. Have you considered consider someone like supporting someone like Laura by XXX, or bringing in Lexi, any of those things. So consider supporting Laura and Lexi, and the insert statistic of people who are living similar stories or experiences by da 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 da. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so very much. I appreciate
Of
that.
course. Yeah, that was really good. That was a great kickoff. And
you.
listen, folks, don't get stressed out like mine doesn't sound like Katie's. Katie says, I've been doing this work as a team. We have been doing the work to wrap our hands around these stories and expand them. So think about it this way, like, ooh, I can't wait till mine sounds like Katie's. Okay. So I want to just name that for folks. Thank you so much, Katie. That was excellent. Thank you for contributing that.
Thank you.
And you're getting kudos in the chat. You're welcome. Additional kudos in the chat. Anyone else want to share? Oh, wait, hold on. I see a question. How can we assess the success of our story? I think the goal for assessing the success is what was your intention behind the story that you're sharing. Makes sense? If your intention was simply to share the story, boom, mission accomplished, success seen, right? If your intention was to maybe garner some support from donors or community members, fiscal support, then you can set a goal and measure those aspects, and then it'll give you an idea of how that story resonated. If you center a call to action, then you can measure how many people took that action against how many people you exposed the story to, and measure it that way. So I always say it really depends on the intention of the story you were sharing, and why you share that particular story as the goal of understanding the impact that the story had. The next thing I would, of course, you're welcome. The next thing I would encourage folks to think through as we kind of prep stories, or kind of work through what we want to see next, is think about how you can curate multiple versions of a story. Like the example that Katie just shared with us is a longer, fuller story, much more detail, that may live in some type of long form content space. But we can take that same exact story about Laura and Lexi and make it 2 to 3 minutes and share it out verbally in a variety of different spaces. Okay, so be willing to be open to exploring some of those things. All right, I'm going to ask the team if there's anything that I may have missed that's in the chat that we might want to lift up at this time.
Yeah, there's just been lots of love for Katie. Thank you so much for volunteering to go first, being that brave first volunteer, Katie. And it does look like we have another hand raised. So another person who is hopefully gonna volunteer to share.
Yay! Thank you, Brecken. Go ahead. What's your name? I saw somebody's unmuted. Am I making that up? Okay, audio connecting. I don't want to mess up your name. Is it? Oh wait, you're back to muted. And Mario, were you going to share?
Yes, I am.
Here you are. Okay,
And you got it right.
I did. But a name like mine, I'm always trying to make sure I get people's names right.
Well, I appreciate that.
Of course.
So my name's Maria Wilson, and I'm the data manager for the Metro Nashville Office of Family Safety. And this is what I've crafted. Imagine you've been living with someone for years. You've built a life together, or so you thought. Then one day, you come across the power and control wheel. You start reading, and it feels like it's reading you. Slowly, it clicks. This isn't love. This is abuse. In that moment, your whole world shifts. You don't see yourself as a victim. You're a parent, a friend, a coworker. You've made excuses for the yelling, the isolation, the way decisions were always made for you. You thought if you just tried harder, things would get better. But now you can't unsee it. At first, there's shock, then fear, because naming the harm means acknowledging the danger. It means realizing that what's been happening is not your fault, but it is your reality. And once you see it, you can't go back to pretending it's not there. The moment of recognition is where change begins. It's the first crack in the cycle of abuse, the first step towards reclaiming your life. But taking that step alone can feel impossible. That's why the Metro Office of Family Safety exists, to make sure no one has to face that moment or the road after it alone. The difference is profound. Where there was shame, there's now understanding. Where there was silence, there's truth. Where there was control, there's a slow, steady return of self. Our vision is a community where no one lives years without realizing they deserve better. A place where people know the signs, name the harm, and believe they are worthy of safety and respect. Because the moment someone stops seeing themselves as just a victim and starts seeing themselves as a survivor in the making, that's the moment the future changes, not just for them, but for everyone around them.
Thank you, Maria. That was so good. And the both of you have a future in radio if y'all ever want it, right? Y'all voices are so good to listen to.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, you're getting some kudos in the chat. I see the hearts and the loves. So here's what I want us to think about. I love when you start, anytime somebody starts a story off with imagine, it automatically primes our brains, right? Because we've been doing it for a long time. Amara, don't go off mute. Don't go on mute. I'm still talking. Wait, I'm gonna ask you questions.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. It primes our brains to start thinking. And that pulls people in because they're like, oh, imagine what? And so they're with you. And so that's a really, really strong space to start. What I want to lift in is, remember when we talked about how stories require 5 things, right?
Mhm.
Character, plot, setting, conflict, and resolution.
Mhm.
Were those things present in the story you just shared?
Not completely, but this is where my questions kind of arise because in my office, we have like case managers and advocates and all, and they work directly with clients, and I kind of have an indirect role.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I just want to kind of learn how to craft my own stories and like be true to myself, like without kind of like overstepping in my role, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I 100%. It makes sense. And so it's a twofold answer to that. One, it's to create the environment where you all can have conversations together and you can say, hey, I heard you talk about XXX. I really would love to bring that over into the work that I'm doing. Can we talk about how to craft a story centered around X that you shared, right? And depends on if there's identifying client information, then you will have those ethical parts of the conversation as well together. The other thing that you can do is if you're looking at the data, like let's say you're looking at the fact that 15% of the clients that come through your door experience blah, insert thing, right? Then you can do a composite story. You create a name and you allow the experience of the person in the story to live based on the data that you have that you're doing a composite of, right? And you're clear when you're doing a composite story, meaning you're not going to say, Mathina was da 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 and she experienced da 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 da, right? As if it's a true story. You're gonna say Mathina experienced da 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 da, and Mathina represents dot 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 dot. Y'all follow me? Yes, that works. Okay. So that would be how I encourage you to think about in your role where you're not directly hearing from a particular person, you're not directly being the one to pass them the piece of paper or to get their phone call. The full scope of your organization's story is what you're telling. So having conversations with some of your team members and talking about, because you're here, and I don't know if you have any other team members here, but as of right now, I'm gonna say they're not. And so you're getting information that they may not be receiving. And so you'll take the framework to them and you'll talk about, remember you mentioned Mathina. I would love to craft some powerful story and messaging that lifts up Mathina's story. And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. And if you don't know the answer to them, that's perfectly fine. And depending on where Mathina is in the journey with your agency, you may or may not be able to touch base with me directly, right? Or have openness to that. And so you may be compositing Mathina with another random name like Max, right? And because sometimes we can even tell the stories without using gender, if possible, things of that nature, by using a name that can go for any person. And then I'll telling the story that way. Is that helpful?
Very.
Okay, cool. And so those are the things. So I would even say something like, imagine knowing someone for years, maybe 15. Now I'm saying 15, which is usually my go-to, but I know Katie used 15 in that story. And then you think you're building a life together, and you, same way you started it. And then one day you learn about this thing called a power and control wheel. That's Mathina's. That's what happened with Mathina. Because in 2019, and then you frame the story, give us a story. You had good messaging, strong, powerful messaging, but the message doesn't quite live in a story yet. And so I would encourage you to think about how you blend this messaging with a story, even if it's a story of a composite person.
I also have to make it more personal.
Because that's what pulls people in. That's what people want to hear about. It's the way we think about the most popular stories, not just movies or books, but the stories that resonate and carry through. You get an idea of the central figure. You connect with the central figure, even if listen, let me give you an example, which I think might be helpful for many of us. The only sport I ever played was tennis in high school for 2.5 seconds. I mean, I won a medal. Don't get me wrong, I won a medal, right? But that's the only sport I've ever played, and I don't necessarily play a sport now. I do some kickboxing, but I'm not a professional athlete. Do you know how many times I will watch a sports documentary and just be sitting there in tears? I go, yes, you did that. You had to work hard. And I'm so tied in, and I'm looking up stuff about this athlete. I'm insert sport, basketball, tennis, soccer. I watched a whole documentary on the Beckhams. I don't care anything about soccer. No offense to anybody who loves it. But it's the humanity. It's the tie-in. This is a message. There's no humanity to this message because there's nothing for me to hold on to. And I know that sounds challenging for some of us. It's like, but listen, we talked about this person. They're a friend, they're a coworker, they're a family member. That's still very abstract. Versus if I tell you a story about Maria. Kind of like how we heard in Katie's story about Laura, right? Maria, who lived in this place, enjoyed this thing. And I might like vanilla ice cream and Maria likes Rocky Road. But the point is we both like ice cream. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful. Was that helpful?
Yes, it was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. My pleasure. My pleasure. It's one of my favorite things to do. All right. So I don't see any additional questions. Any other burning questions that folks have? And if you're like, Mathina, I'm still working on my question. I'm processing, I'm consuming what we've talked about today. Bring those questions with you tomorrow. Okay? Bring those questions with you tomorrow. It's okay. Spend some time, go back and listen to what you already kind of put together. Think about your notes and your feedback, and then let's just jump right in as we come back into our conversation tomorrow, okay? Because we're at the tail end right now. You're welcome, Victoria. Thank you. All right, it's gone by fast. We technically still have time, but I'm also one of those people that don't belabor the point. Like, I'm not going to hold you just so we can get to that 4 o'clock time slot. So let me do some basic wrap up things and get you working with some pre-work, get you working with some growth work for it tomorrow, okay? So what we had a chance to do today was to look at identifying barriers to developing a storytelling culture in your organization. We looked at integrating storytelling as a core value in your agency or for yourself if you are representing an organization. We presented existing storytelling guides and resources that NRCVD has for you now that's already on the site that you can pull, download, and review. And of course, we offered our custom storytelling framework to help you increase the impact of your stories and messages, and so much more, right? And you all had a chance to either draft your first version of your story or redefine the version of your story you already worked on. If you heard me give feedback today and thought, I could apply that to my story, then I want to encourage you to do that. Don't work on that tonight or this afternoon. Bring it back with you tomorrow, right? Because tomorrow we'll continue working together to revise how you're using the NRCDV framework, okay? Now, you may have seen us drop a drop a link in the chat, and there should be a QR code on screen for you. It is where you all can complete the evaluation for today's session, okay? We'll have a separate evaluation after tomorrow's session. So the content you're receiving today will not be repeated tomorrow. We will reference some of the content you heard today, like the framework, this NRCDV framework, but you will have completely new content for tomorrow. And therefore, the evaluation for tomorrow is going to be different. So please take your time to complete today's evaluation and let us know how you experienced today's session. And here is a reminder of your growth work, okay? Take the story you worked on today or the story you did in your pre-work, and choose the story you want to focus on, and then apply the framework to that story. And I want you to come back prepared to share tomorrow. Tomorrow, everyone will do their best to share their story with someone, even if it's not in the classroom today. You're going to find someone to share your story with. It's a peer, a colleague. Hey, I'm working on this Storytelling Institute. I want to share my story with you. Give me your feedback, because then I'm going to hop into the Institute, or I'm going to be able to apply what I've learned in a different way. Okay, so you're going to learn new strategies and techniques tomorrow. So we're going to dive deeper into sensory storytelling. We're going to explore techniques for bringing your stories to life in different mediums, right? So I really want to encourage you all to do that. If you haven't watched the pre-work video, if you haven't watched the 9 minutes and 30 seconds or 10 minutes or the whole thing, then I really do want to encourage you to watch that charity water video. Ideally, you want to watch the first 8 to 10 minutes of it. Because we're going to be covering it tomorrow. We're going to be using it to break down impact as well. Okay. Lastly, in your work, but there are those additional resources that we mentioned. There's some articles on storytelling. There's a psychology of storytelling article and why it drives action. These pair perfectly with the work you've done today and your pre-work. And it's an easy resource for you to share with other members in your organization, okay? If you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to our training and technical assistance specialist at NRCDV. You wanna grab that evaluation link, again, if you haven't done so already. See those of you who are already dropping off. But I wanna take a moment and I wanna thank our team, all right? Everyone who supported in the chat, our narrator, our producer, our interpreters, thank you all for making today an amazing experience for everyone. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We're gonna hang out for maybe 2 or 3 minutes if you have any additional questions before we close the room, and come back same time, same place tomorrow, all right?
Thanks for joining us at the 2025 Storytelling Institute, brought to you by the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, our partners and sponsors. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 2 of the Institute. Join us online at www.nrcdv.org for updates. That's nrcdv.org for updates. Before you leave, please complete the evaluation survey. Your feedback is critical to the success of this program. As you complete your survey, feel free to leave the session. Have a great day and a fabulous week. We'll see you here tomorrow.